Okay. Hello, Facebook. Good afternoon. It is Friday, the 4th of March. I'm Heidi Ferguson, and next to me, pretty in pink, is Fedesta Ramsey, and this is Cocktails and Pajamas. So I'm just really pleased that we took a moment to kind of settle in and focus before we got on. I will say that supports me, it supports my mental health, it supports my whole system. And yeah, so one of the things that I've been checking in the last few weeks about is my mental health. And I want to elaborate a little bit today in my check-in about that, which is given everything that's been happening in the world. I shared with Fedesta a couple days ago that I've really been challenged in releasing it. And I realized that I have some judgment around that. I'm like, gosh, Heidi, you're someone who's really in touch with your feelings. You're a deep thinker, you're a deep feeler, you're an HS, all that stuff. And yet you can't release this. And so what I decided last night as I was scrolling through and trying to find something to watch, I came upon one of my favorite movies that supports me in releasing. And what I found throughout the course of the movie is that I was crying a lot, I was releasing a lot, and it felt really heavy, but it felt good and it felt right. And I was like, and I was really pleasantly surprised at the depth of my grief, because I don't, when I watch this movie, I always cry, but I don't typically cry so hard where I'm like heaving. And that was the case last night. And I was like, oh, thank God. And I feel like there's probably more coming. There's always more, and that's okay. I'm just glad that I kind of got the first shedding, if you will, through. At least part of it is it's partial. And I'm also aware that in the world, there's still so much that we are holding space for, um, and still working on loving and having patience for. And I want to say that in general, I really get that it's hard for the majority of us. These are really challenging times right now. There's a lot of pain. So if you can connect with others, if you can connect with another human or an animal, I believe most animals are support animals, whether or not they're trained to be support animals. I do believe that humans just innately have a connection, and because we all need that. Yeah, I want to support that, and I want to encourage you to reach out in whatever way you need to reach out. Do that, because it's just not a time to try to buck up and put on our big girl pants and do it alone. It's just not. It's not that. So yeah. So I'm gonna stop there, and I'm gonna ask beautiful Fedesta to check in and what's happening in your world.
Thank you so much for naming that. I just want to honor that first. This place where we're all given this idea of self-care, which is beautiful, and then there is community care, right? And leaning on the resilience of others or the love of a pet. And I see you leaning on art, right? A movie to also give you that. So just yeah, and here, post in the comments, right? We can see you there and witness you, like be seen in whatever's going on. Yeah, for me, it's an interesting place because, as I shared with you last week, I had the passing of a really beloved musician that I had watched for 30 years. And then we went and saw Patti Smith. And I started to recognize, like, who are the artists that I gravitate towards? Who are they? What are they about? What's the the thread between them. And they all have a level of activism. I keep calling it feral, but I think it's this like righteous anger, right? That leads to the moral courage to be a change maker, to be tenacious with whatever's going on, and to continue to be a voice for people. So it's a tenacity that comes from, instead of collapsing when we see injustice, like rising, stepping forward during times of injustice. And I've noticed for me, I lean quite heavily on my gentle, sweet, soft nature, which is totally a part of me. And there's this part that is just fucking furious and thinks it's too intense to bring to people, right? And maybe in the past it was. Um, but I have different people in my world now who have enormous capacity to hold whatever's coming up for me. And I've collected evidence of that. So I'm naming it because I think there's a safe harbor now for that part of me to also be available that demands change, demands, you know, we be more upright of a species, I guess. That's the bottom line for me. Um, but noticing that when I get angry, there is a part of me that wants to still be cool, calm, and collected and harness it and like handle it and manage it. But what really happens is there's this rising of heat and fury. And I feel like I get a little faster, I get a little breathier, I get a little heated, for lack of a better word. And then there's a part that wants to like tame that, you know, put some reins on that. And I'm just realizing, no, that part gets to be what it needs to be. And I've got to manage the part of me that wants to manage it. So that's a really interesting observation I'm having for myself of like, oh, and you even still want to be coachy here, right? Instead of being like, no, you can have your full, untamed anger. We've talked about it in other conversations where that one wasn't a loud emotion. So I did it privately as a teenager in my room with heavy metal. Like I could get as angry as I wanted in my bedroom. And now I'm playing with, can I show that to others? Because that's the edge stretch. That's the work. Yeah. So that's the start of my check-in.
Yeah. I want to say bravo to that. And as your friend, and supporter of you, I would love to see more of that when it's necessary, as opposed to the coaching piece.
Yeah.
Because, and this is just my take on it, but when the coach shows up, in my head, I go, what's being covered? Like,
Yeah.
what is she not exposing? What is she not sharing? Is there something else that is there that probably needs to be expressed? And yet she's going, because she's really comfortable with the coach road or that route, that's where she's going to sit for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. And trust me, I really get it, because as I've shared, I grew up in a home where we were not literally not allowed to be angry, not allowed to show anger, not allowed to feel anger, any of it. And when we did, we were scolded, like we were reprimanded for it, and shamed and all of that. I'm just like, no, we're human. Humans feel. And it doesn't matter if you're an HSP, it doesn't matter what level of feeling you are as a human or have as a human. But it's important that we feel as humans safe enough to access all of it. because all of it makes all of our feelings make up who we are, and they're an important part of who we are.
You know, I so am grateful for you saying that. And you're not the first person to say it. And I've also even had clients who've been like, you know, when I first met you, I had a client call me Mother Penguin. Like, you have this Mother Penguin energy. It's so loving, it's beautiful, it's everything. And it's anemic, right? If it's only one facet of who I am. And you know, this place in me, I think back to even being like 12 or 13, and I had this intensity, and I was ashamed of our world, and I was ashamed of humanity, and I could see what could be a better world. Like, all of that drives my relationship education and coaching, right? But I was so ashamed of who we were as a species that my intensity came through as like, I don't want to deal with any of you, right? It was a disconnector. So growing up, it was like, you know, the goth kid everyone's kind of scared of, right? That was how I handled my intensity and my anger. And so this is like doing it differently, to be like, how could it be a connector, right? For me to be like, okay, I'm not going to hide that part. Or for me, it was even just compartmentalizing it. Oh, I put my anger into my music, right? I put it into my songs. I channel that, what feels like toxicity, into some outlet. So that's where I do it only. That's the problem. Is it's in this little waffle square, right? Over here I coach and I'm soft and gentle, and over here I can rage on a song, right? And it's like, those parts of me don't want to be separate and compartmentalized anymore.
Mhm.
And I think that's what's happening, is there's a part of me going, can you just be you? Can you just be you? And if you're angry about something, is that okay with me? Is that okay with me? Right? Because it seems to be okay with the people around me. Um, and almost, as you were saying, welcome, celebrated. Like, some people are like, oh, thank God. Like, you're not, you know, like a one dimensional being.
Right,
So it's an interesting journey to have that be welcomed in and trustworthy.
right, right, right. Because I will say one of the it took me a while to take this in as a compliment. And many people have said this to me over the years. I always know where I stand with you. And at first I was just like, thank you, right? And then I was like, oh no, that's a good thing,
Yeah.
because people don't want to be BS'd around. They really do want to know how you feel about them.
Mm-hmm.
And quite honestly, I'm just going to let it rip today. So I'm just one of these people who, if I want you in my life, you'll be in my life. But if I don't want you in my life, you're not in my life. Like, it's really clear.
Yeah.
And I have no shame around that. I have no qualms. I don't make excuses. I'm just like, I have tested the waters with X person or Y person. And I know that I want more of this person, and I really don't want any more of this person. So I'm just going to gently let them go away. Right. And it's not that I don't want anything to do with them, but to bring them in closer into my little
Mm-hmm.
globe, into my orb, no, that's not going to happen. I can hold them at a safe distance and I feel okay. Um, I mean, there have been people where I'm just like, hell no, no more. Right. And really clear about that. Like, literally have blocked people. And, um, and that typically is because the boundary's been crossed, like, one too many times. And I'm just like, I really did my best to tell you nicely, and you've messed up too many times. And I tried again, and I made another attempt, another attempt. After two or three, no, no, no. I'm blocking you on my phone. I'm blocking you email. I'm every aspect. So you and I cannot be, and I've had people say, wow, that's extreme. And I'm like, well, it might feel extreme at first, but I'm also not inundated with all this toxicity and this crap. Like, I don't need that and I don't want it in my life. So why wouldn't I protect myself from it? You
Yeah,
know?
100%.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. I think there's something coming up for me, and maybe it's a conflation, or I'm trying to parse something apart, which is I thought, how do I say this? I thought being that part of me that's still 100% genuinely me, right? The gentle, the soft spoken, the loving, the teacher, the mother penguin archetype. I was like, that's still 100% who I am. Like, none of that's fake. But what's interesting is in the composite, like when you think of a photo, right? It still felt sketchy to people if that was all I was being. So it's really interesting to be like, but none of that was unto itself curated, but the composite was curated. Isn't that interesting? Because it's one thing to be like, oh, I was totally being fake. But it was like, no, I just wasn't bringing like what I'm bringing right now, which is like, this is this is who I am as a musician. I'm
Yeah.
a little more animated. I'm a little bit more expressive. I cuss a little bit more,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
and emotions I think in that world were welcome
Hmm.
long before other circles of friends welcomed it,
Right.
right? You're writing a song about being enraged about war. So everyone's like right there with you. The guitars are making that noise, the drums are
Yes.
making that noise. Everyone is buying into, we're going to be ragey for this song.
Yeah.
So there's permission like all
Right.
over the place there. And particularly as a band leader, there's also, we're following your emotional leadership.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go with this?
Yes.
And I think only now in my life have I built the kind of friendships, kind of partnership where I can like bring that part of me in and know I won't be, I'm going to say rejected
Mm. Hmm.
for it.
Hmm.
Because that feels like the place, right? It's, oh my gosh, if I'm bold and intense and always in my feelings, are people going to leave? Am I going to be too much? Right? We've talked about that before. It's like, what if you're just even better to the people who love you because they're like, finally, I knew there was that part of you. You just were kind of in hiding, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just a good compartmentalizer. That's what I'm
Hmm.
learning, like structures, curriculum, models, you know, um, planning. But to do that with my personality,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it can be a challenge for sure. Yeah. And it's also really, I believe I will speak for myself because I have really, really, really intense and big feelings. I have to, like, I have to compartmentalize it. Um, and, and I can't say that I compartmentalize 100% of the time because there are times when, my emotions in a conversation can literally be like this, like really high, really low, flatline, whatever. And I'm like, wow. And I feel like I had a moment a couple weeks ago. I did, where um we were talking on was it the new moon or the full moon with Lindsay, and I had what Brene calls
The vulnerability hangover.
a vulnerability
Hmm.
hangover. I got off the call and I just, like, for the next 24, 48 hours, I was in this shame spiral. I was like, oh my God, I showed too much of like, I went down this road and I didn't watch the podcast until, I don't know, later that week because I was too afraid to watch like, see myself and all that. And then once I did, I was just like, that wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
And, and, and I'm really glad that I brought myself fully to that conversation and also to myself because I don't, it's one thing just to do it in life because we're not recording ourselves. most of the time we're not recording ourselves, but then to see, like, for me to watch myself on camera, I'm like, wow, okay. Um, and so it's a learning tool to watch myself as a learning tool, but I also wanted to I wanted to see how big I thought, like my perception of myself was like, oh my God. I'm like, it really wasn't that terrible. It actually wasn't bad at all. And so I'm really glad that I did go back and watch,
Mm.
because I can really freak myself out sometimes. Because our
Mm.
perception is so different than how others perceive us 99% of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm glad you got to the other side of it. And I'm also curious around like when you were in it, what was the story you were making up?
So the story I was making up had to do with the Akashic reading, which was about exposing ourselves more. And I was already feeling the anxiety around that.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm like really exposing myself. Like I'm sharing things and 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 I know, like, innately I do know that what I'm feeling isn't necessarily what people can see, but because I was feeling it so strongly, and I don't know that I was having an anxiety attack, but I was certainly on the verge of, because I was feeling hot. I mean, it was all the things, and I was like, oh my God. And so, I'm sorry, what was your question? I totally,
No,
what?
no, that's okay. I was just saying, like, what story did you make up between the podcast and then watching it? What was like the story that was driving your
Oh, I'm,
hangover?
I'm so I'm too much, like on a global level. Like this world can't handle me. And I'm like, who are you, Heidi? Like it was, and then as I heard myself say that, I'm like, you ain't all that. Like you're just not all that. Like you're who you are, and you're a great woman, you're an awesome woman, but it's not as big as you
Mhm.
think it is. And
Mm.
so, but I didn't get there until after I watched it. I was just like, oh my God, I feel so exposed. I feel naked. I feel really challenged with this. And the other piece that I was struggling with, because of what our podcast is about,
Mhm.
right? Authenticity and being real and all that. And I was just like, but this is what we're taught. This is our, like, this is the thesis. This is the theme of our podcast. So there's really nothing wrong with
Mhm.
being exposed and feeling big and all of that. Um, so I was really glad that I got myself to that place, that I'm
Yeah.
not, wallowing in the all that, because that just doesn't feel good. And it's not true. Like my perception wasn't true to what was at all. It was
Yeah.
so much worse.
Yeah, but I also feel like it was such a gift because even if we are talking about authenticity and transparency and nakedness and, showing up and revealing ourselves in relationship with others, I think it's really important for our audience to know like sometimes that feels like a lot to us.
Yes.
We can stand for that, we can advocate for it, we can believe deeply in our hearts about it. I know I
Yeah.
do. And we can still have a vulnerability hangover
Yeah.
after doing it,
Yeah.
right? It just feels like it humanizes and normalizes that it's not always going to feel like you've got a cape flying behind you,
Right.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going to feel like 2 days of questioning yourself,
Right.
right? And then the second piece, and this is my teacher hat on a little, is too much requires compared to what? You know what I mean?
I do. I know
Like
exactly what you mean.
too much requires a comparison. And how could we possibly compare like spirits and souls
Right.
and all of that?
Right.
And I guess good enough falls in there too, right? It's like
Yeah.
there's both sides of like a really uncomfortable. Think of if I was wearing like a jacket and it's like a jacket I want to take off because it's like too much compared to who, compared to what, and then not enough compared to who, compared to what.
I know.
And it sucks that we have each, I'm willing to bet, if we've been listening to a society like ours,
Mhm,
been told we have to wear one of those hats, or
mhm,
some people wear both of those
mhm,
hats.
mhm.
And I just kind of go, but that means you're comparing. How are we? We're not comparable to each
Right.
other. I don't think.
No, I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. I
I
completely
feel
agree
like
with you.
each human I've met holds like multitudes.
Yes.
And how could I possibly like, oh, that person's kind of like that person?
Not at all.
It's
Not at
impossible.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I'd like to add is that when a human does show up with all of that, I find I find that person or those people to be mm, more more beautiful and more inviting
Hmm.
and um I don't know if I can think of any more adjectives, but I find that I'm drawn more to someone who is going to expose themselves.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think of, going back to the Patti Smith show, because obviously it's the only show I've seen in like so long besides Bocelli. Um, and, she performed powerfully. Her band was tight. Her vocal range, her dexterity, her agility, like all the things that you're like, wow, this person's been singing for 50 years, right? Singing rock punk for
Yeah.
50 years. So, like, all of that was impeccable. And the moment that moved me the most didn't have to do with her singing or her band's chops. It had to do with her. She stumbled around a little in her little dance moves, and she came back up to the stage after the song and she said, you know what, you guys, I'm here. I'm glad to be here with you guys. I'm kind of stumbling around because I'm still grieving about what's happening in the Ukraine. And I'm here with you, but also my heart's over there. And I have to just name that. Like, I want us to have a good time. I want us to enjoy the night. We deserve to, you know, enjoy what we have here. And at the same time, like, I'm not right. That was the most powerful thing she did on stage, in my opinion,
Yeah.
was to say, I'm hurting and we're going to rock this out.
Yeah.
But I want you to know when you see me kind of not at my best, even though I think she's impeccable, that it's because I'm human, I'm hurting, I'm in pain, and I'm at the mic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you said, that was, she's already endearing to me because she's kind of a goofy, awkward bookworm type. Um, but for her to do that instead of kind of faux threeing it and pretending she's fine the whole night, she let us in.
Yeah.
She didn't have to do that. And she actually let us feel into our hearts that we were grieving too.
Mhm.
It was a connector,
Right.
And if she had just been a cool rock star,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't like, it would have been fine, but it would have lacked the humanity.
Yeah.
That's what's relational.
Right. Right.
And I'm saying this even while I'm trying to practice a new a new muscle around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and
Being
and so
relational.
for those who are in a similar situation as exercising and practicing to exercise this muscle, know that that is what it is. It takes a while. It's not an easy thing to do. Um, and to continue believing in yourself that it really can be done. It can be done. And so I'm going to pivot a little bit and share that very recently, um, I'm going to uh, share that someone in my life, close to me shared with another person in my life that's close to me that they were dealing with some really hard things, feeling like they were burdened, feeling like they were too much, and blah, 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 blah. And I don't, the blah, 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 I'm not trying to, discount it. I'm just like, that's kind of the line we were going down. And so sharing that was a big deal for this person. And so, and then also knowing that and having that information that the other person that it was told to was equally important, because not only is it important for, and I'm going to generalize here, humans to not sit alone with their hard feelings or any feelings, it's actually really liberating. And like you said, it's a connector, because when we're vulnerable, which is really hard and it can be really scary to do, but when we are vulnerable and when we show up as humans in our humanness, that connects us and we can support one another. But if we show up and we're like, yeah, it's a great day, the sun is shining, and I'm doing great, and on the inside we're not doing great, you might want to check yourself. And because that's not a connector. Like, I don't want to talk about, like, I love that the sun is shining and the weather's getting warmer and the days are getting longer. Like, I love that. But I can only talk about that for about 30 to 45 seconds. And then it's over. Right? But the other, like, knowing that this person is struggling a little bit and is feeling all these things, um, makes me want to inquire, not because I'm being nosy, but because I really care about this person. And I'm hoping that they, knowing and feeling the energy from me, my Care Bear love heart. I love that. Um, I hope that they will feel even more inclined to share more. Um, because and it's not as if we don't want to hear when people are doing well. We do. I love knowing people are doing well, but it's as important to me to know that someone's not doing so great. Because the reality is, like I said a few moments ago, we are all humans having experiencing a human experience, and we actually have a lot of feelings, and we're allowed to feel them, and we're allowed to express it, and we're allowed to share, so that we don't feel so isolated with it. Yeah.
I love that so much. Thank you for just inviting people into that, because I hold this place too of, I call it emotional congruence, right? I can come in and say to you, like, oh, well, spirit's untroubled. Spirit's always untroubled, right?
Mhm.
And here's what's going on with the human animal in me that's dealing with stuff. I believe that me being emotionally congruent that way with you makes me trustworthy, makes our relationship trustworthy, gives us a solid foundation, right? All those things. And I know for me, and I've experienced this recently, when I get what feels, and I'm going to use the word anemic again, like an anemic response or a one-sided response, like things are great, things are wonderful, big smile, forced pretense, right? Um, it's not only that that person ends up being isolated with their experience, I feel kept at arm's length. I feel like I'm outside the gates of the moat, right? And the drawbridge isn't going down. And I can't get to this person. So it's incredibly disconnecting over here, too, to be left outside the door with what I imagine is clearly not a full answer, right? And at worst is a lie, right? Is a complete fabrication. And I had to ask a few friends about that recently. Like, man, like I experienced intuitively something that was not cool for me and got the memo. And I'm still chewing on this of like, when someone does that, they have deep seated anxiety about being seen a certain way, being seen as good, being seen as strong, being seen as having it together, whatever the like identity mask is, right? And so it's like, I'm like, oh my God, somebody just lied to my face. And they're like, yeah, no, it's not about you. I'm like, okay, tell me more. And getting to the place of, do you know that place in you that might get too scared to speak up, that might get too anxious, that you really want to be seen a certain way by somebody that matters to you? And so there I can have a compassionate lens, but still hand out invitations again and again to say, there's got to be more than this, right? Because yes, I feel like we can tell each other we're well, right? Like I'm well right now, and there's things going on for me. And if I didn't get to share that with you as my friend, I mean, how much of a friendship would we have? I guess is really the question I hold, right? Um, Jason Gaddis says if you're not speaking the truth in your relationships, you are creating superficial relationships. And I don't want superficial relationships. I don't have time for them. They feed me no nourishment. If anything, they deplete me, which is a real, like, I have my eye on that. Any place that's an energy leak. So, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that because I'm all fired up again. But also noticing when I get furious about something, my thoughts don't really thread together well, and being like, that's okay too. Like, there's the messy part of being so furious for something.
Yeah.
It's not an against stance. It's like I'm standing
No.
for, like, let's just like throw our hearts on the table, see what happens. We're
Yeah.
not going to be here for very long.
Right.
Why don't we just do this with like fierce love and nakedness? Like
Yeah.
that's the promised land for me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And then how do
Yeah.
we help people who are afraid to show up have capacity?
So I'm going to share a little something I heard on a podcast a couple weeks ago. So Dr. Phil was a guest on a podcast a couple weeks ago that I was listening to, and apparently he uses this technique also on his show. I don't watch his show, so I'm not aware of it, but he shared with this person that this person had asked him, so if you can see how someone's life can be better, like they're making all these mistakes, like, you know, they're an addict, or they are in a situation, and it's a pattern, it's a pattern that does not serve them. How can one have a conversation where the information that they are, you know, on the other side of the table with the information so that it can get through, so they can hear them without saying, you need to be fixed. you need, right? And it was brilliant. And he said, he's like, well, one of the things you can do is say to the person, I believe that you deserve better. And so I see this happening, and I want more for you. And I want you to know that I believe in you. And so how do you feel about that? And leave it, so it not only opens a conversation, but it also, instead of having this kind of shame energy where one is pointing finger, it's a more open conversation, and it allows for dialogue to happen. Because I will say, if someone would have approached me as a child and said, I see that you're having big feelings, and I want you, because you deserve to have the big feelings, I want to walk with you and I want to be with you in it. So let's find a way to do that. Oh my God, that would have been a game changer for me and probably for a lot of people, who have been told they're too much or whatever. But so I was just really moved by that response, and I was just like, yeah, yes to all of that. And so I guess I'm going to just make a general statement by saying, for those of you who are feeling like it's not okay to share and not okay to open up, I believe you deserve more. And I believe that you deserve to open up and to have connection with people instead of keeping them distant from you, to keep them closer, because when you're isolated, it festers and it can result into illness, mental illness, physical illness. Um, and I think at the end of the day, most of us don't want to be isolated. We do crave, we are wired for connection, as Brene says. Um, yeah. And I do understand that at these times it's harder when a lot of us are living alone. But we can make it happen if we want to.
Yeah, I so love that. I got to see that part of the video yesterday, and yeah, I
Mm,
was in full agreement because I know for me, wanting to have my own sovereignty and agency, if someone says, you need, you know, to get a physical trainer or whatever, like as though they have any real authority, right? That even if they're right, there's still a
yeah.
bristling. And if someone says, gosh, I really think you deserve better than that, that just feels like an invitation, right? And I've done that in my relationship when we were kind of going off the rocks, and I was like, we deserve better than this. Like, we deserve better than this conflict cycle and this kind of insecure relationship style and this place where neither of us is ever getting a rest from, fighting with each other. We deserve better than this. Are we up for learning, being teachable? That's a big part of it, right? Got to learn new skills. And to your point about letting people in, I know for me, when I finally, and it took me a long time to let people in when I was feeling really messy, like not just I'm messy, but I'm ashamed about being messy,
Mm,
right? That place, it's really tender, that place. And I was loved on, not just anyway, but especially because I was in that
mhm.
I'm messy and I'm ashamed I'm messy place. And I was just like, love was poured on me anyway. I got to love myself more in those places. So there's a lot of ripple effects to letting someone in. They feel like they can be trusted and let in and come through, right? As a friend, you get to see that you can be loved in the fullness of who you are. I mean, that was my experience. And then maybe the love trickles into those places for me that I didn't love before in myself because someone else is like, you're so lovable. Like, what's the problem?
Yeah.
Right? So there's just so many blessings to, and I hear it's a risk emotionally,
Mhm.
but with that risk, there is like some massive rewards, in my opinion. Massive. Maybe even unfathomable to some of you right now.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
okay too. Yeah. Ooh.
Mm. So tender.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. So wow, the time. Here we are again at the end of our hour. Yeah.
Right.
So let's do the and question.
Oh, okay. I don't have
I
them
don't
with
have
me. Let
my,
me go grab them. I can go
okay.
grab them. No problem. One second.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So we've got the and cards, which I guess I should share with our audience in case someone's curious. So they look like this. They are from, I almost thought they were from the Gottmans, but I think I heard about it through the Gottman Institute. You get a bunch of cards like this. Give them a good shuffle, and then Heidi's going to pick one in real time, and we're going to both answer it.
Okay.
I love that this is the long-term couples edition. I think we've reached that place.
Oh, God.
And if there's any weird physical sexy ones, we'll skip it.
Okay.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay. And I'm gonna just like say whenever you feel that middle finger is where the card is for you.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna skip this one because it's about how our kissing has changed. I had a sense that might happen. It hasn't happened too often.
No, it doesn't. That's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
This one? Yeah. Huh. Okay, some of these are weird, but let's see. What's a habit of mine that you've now adopted?
I don't know that I would call it a habit.
Okay.
I just think it's it's just your way of being and who you are. I have noticed that I have softened a lot. And wow. Yeah. And so you model that for me in everything, every conversation we have, and I'm just like, wow. And so I've just noticed that I have softened a lot. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah.
I'm so touched. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see that softening right now, which is just beautiful. Okay, your turn.
So what habit of mine have you adopted in your life?
I think similarly, not a habit per se, but a way of being of yours that I've admired since I first met you, which was a very clear, direct way of communicating. It's not my nature. I tend to side crab walk and cushion and do all those things. And you've really taught me what it means, like why it's important to just be direct and clear and how relational that is. So yeah, you've helped me kind of curb a timidity, I suppose, that I've had around, oof, how's this going to land if it's so direct, you know? Yeah. It's a sort of, and I don't want to say it's not the opposite of softness, but it's sort of a very proactive approach to communicating that leaves nothing to be questioned.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm glad. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels good to know that. Yeah.
Because I imagine in prior friendships, relationships, people probably went away going, what did she mean by that? Right? Because I was being pretty timid. And now I can give some much more, and I'm still working on it, but just watching you model that week after week of here it is. Unapologetically, may I say, too. Which is powerful. It's just powerful.
Yeah.
Thanks, friend.
Thank you. This was really yummy. As always. Yeah.
And thank you to our audience. I hope it serves you that we continue to bring up these conversations that are definitely on our hearts. And if anything resonated with you, or if you want to be seen in anything, or if you have a question that pops up throughout the week, please reach out and share it with us. We'd love to hear from you. Okay,
Bye,
bye.
everyone.